Welcome back to CBS Sports HQ. Here's a look at the current odds for NFL MVP over at FanDuel. Patrick Mahomes matching the Chiefs' Super Bowl odds as the betting favorite in their respective categories. Right behind Mahomes is Josh Allen at 8-1. Our Evan Washburn recently caught up with the Bills quarterback at training camp to talk about the changes ahead of the new season.
We've obviously got a different team. We got a lot of turnover. Very, very young guys. We're returning one receiver, Khalil Shakir. But I'll tell you what, these guys are coming in. They're working hard. We've had a good couple days. We're going to keep things rolling. The guys are excited to be here. They're ready and willing to work, and it's been a fun group so far.
What does that mean for you in terms of what's required when there's so much change?
Yeah, I think just being a little bit more vocal, making sure that I'm setting the example of doing things the right way, and it starts in walkthroughs, it starts in practice, meeting rooms, all that. So just making sure that I'm on top of my game and setting a good example for each of our new guys and following what Coach McDermott's trying to teach us.
Hey there, folks. I'm Tommy Tran, joined by Ryan Wilson and Pete Prisco. R-Dub living up in the NY area. And Pete Prisco, fresh off a recent visit with the Bills at their training camp. So the perfect guys to talk to about this team and this quarterback. Pete, I'm going to have you start first on Josh Allen because we know he's the type of player who's not mistake-free, but his positive outweighs the negatives. Or do they? Where do you land on Josh Allen for those who aren't initiated to the Prisco thought process?
Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? I know there's guys that we work with, Lejay Duzabel, who loves to rip on Josh Allen because of the turnovers. But do you know he has more touchdowns than anybody else in the last 4 years? 40+ in each of the 4 seasons. 40+. That's running and throwing. Nobody's ever done that. The guy is amazing. Yeah, he turns the ball over, and he's got to cut down on the turnovers. But one of the things he told me, and I wrote about this, is he's lost weight. He's done some things. He hired a dietitian. He cut down on eating a lot of carbs, and he's told Brandon Beane that he's not going to run as much. Now, is that true? It remains to be seen, but I think there's a real effort to get the ball out of his hands and keep him from putting himself in harm's way where he can turn the ball over.
Tommy, you mentioned I was with Pete last week in Buffalo at Bill's training camp, and I don't know if Pete's rubbing off on me or not, but I can't believe we're talking about this. Josh Allen is one of the best players in the NFL. We saw the odds there to win the MVP, which sort of backs that up. But this is what I always say when people complain about head coaches or even quarterbacks. What's your plan B? If you don't think Josh Allen is capable of taking this team where it needs to be, what are you going to do instead of Josh Allen? And look, the reasons this team has struggled in the past historically in recent years has absolutely nothing to do with Josh Allen. Josh Allen didn't kick the ball off with 13 seconds to go. Josh Allen didn't turtle up at the end of games when the defense no-showed in the playoffs. Josh Allen is the reason they're where they are. And I can't believe I sound like a Pete Prisco apologist, but this is all true. This team was 6-6. They made a change at the offensive coordinator position. They finished 6-1. I think Joe Brady, the new offensive coordinator, who was the interim last year, is going to help this offense have more balance. We heard Josh Allen talking about only Khalil Shakir returned. They drafted Keon Coleman, and there are legit concerns about the wide receivers, but Pete will tell you, don't be surprised if Dalton Kincaid, the tight end, gets a large target share this year as well. So I am not concerned in the least bit, Tommy, about Josh Allen.
You know, it's always interesting. We can find and cherry pick different kind of narratives. Like, for instance, our researcher on CBSSports.com kind of pointed out that Josh Allen, points off of his also turnovers. But then there's also a different narrative, gentlemen, about his MVP odds, which is only shorter by Patrick Mahomes. Pete, this type of team does not have Gabe Davis. It does not have Stefon Diggs here. What will this Buffalo offense look like here in 2024?
Look for the ball to get out quicker, and that's something they've made a real effort to do. And in talking with Joe Brady, Josh Allen, Sean McDermott, all of them, Brandon Beane, every single one of them said they want the ball out quicker, and that comes with being a veteran quarterback and understanding the offense. Look, Josh Allen feels comfortable in this offense. They worked on some mechanical things to try and get him better in the offense, and I think what we saw when we were there for 2 days, and I was there for 2 days, and Ryan was there for one, the ball is getting out quicker. And yeah, we can look at their wide receiver group and say, well, they don't have Stefon Diggs and Gabe Davis. Well, the reality is they don't care that they don't have Stefon Diggs. And people will say, wow, he's a star receiver. Go back and look what he did in the last 10 games of the season. He was not a star receiver. He was just a guy. And they feel they can piece things together. Kincaid and Knox will be on the field together in a lot of situations. That'll help the middle of the field. And I think Kincaid, like Ryan mentioned, I think he might lead the league in terms of tight end catches. That's how good he can be.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Pete said there. Stefon Diggs was important when he arrived in Buffalo, and you could argue in much the same way Tyreek and Tua and Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase helped each other. Stefon Diggs helped Josh Allen early in his career, but it felt like that relationship ran its course, and now they've moved on. And all the things that Pete has talked about, I think there's going to be more balance in this offense. And by I say balance, I mean James Cook and Ray Davis, who they like a lot, the rookie running back out of Kentucky, and hopefully less running from Josh Allen. We know he can win with his legs, but he cannot put himself in harm's way if this team's going to be successful. And look, I think Keon Coleman's a great story. I think he has first-round talent, but I also think, Tommy, that he's probably not going to put up the numbers that folks might expect early on. He might get there midway through the season, but this offense will not be built around him replacing Gabe Davis and or Steph Diggs. There's going to have to be a group effort there, and I think Khalil Shakir provides more of that opportunity, and even Curtis Samuel a little bit as well.
So that's a look at the offense there for Buffalo. If we look at the team total here in terms of the AFC East, four-time reigning champions, Ryan Wilson, although they had to have Miami falter and them emerge at the end to make it four straight, which is to ask you about what the division looks like and if Buffalo, in your opinion, is the favorite. We know Miami and the Jets are right behind them. What do you think about the division as it stands with Buffalo?
Well, Pete, now that Mac Jones is in Jacksonville, the Patriots aren't going to win the division, so we can put them right where they are, plus 2,400. Look, Aaron Rodgers played 4 plays last year. If he's healthy, okay. The defense is going to do a lot of heavy lifting for New York. I like that. And I'm going to parrot Pete here. Let me know when the Dolphins show up in December. They're a great team for 2.5, 3 months, and then the wheels seem to fall off. So this feels like an easy pick for me, going chalk as we sit here in the middle of August. Buffalo does have concerns with depth at edge rusher and its safety. Everything else I feel pretty good about. The offensive line is better than people think. We talked about the rest of the offense. So I like the Bills to win this division. And the curious question for me is, can the Dolphins play in December, and is Aaron Rodgers able to stay healthy and make this offense something than what it was hard to watch the last few seasons in New York?
Yeah, I think the Bills are the favorite to win the division, and there's a reason they're the favorite. They're the best team in the division. And all those people that talk about the window shutting, that's ridiculous. The reason the window isn't shut is because of Josh Allen. But more than that, go to the defensive side of the ball. Go back to a year ago. Daquan Jones missed the majority of the season, best run stuffer. Matt Milano missed the majority of the season, best linebacker. Tre'Davious White wasn't there for the majority of the season. He was their best corner. And the two safeties, both Poyer and Hyde, neither one who was there, were both banged up last year. It was a broken down defense by the end, and yet here they were at the end of the season. Josh Allen's firing rifle shots into the back of the end zone to beat the Chiefs, and they missed a kick late that could have tied it. So the bottom line is, this team is better than it was a year ago. Von Miller, by the way, I talked to Von Miller. He feels like last year he thought he'd be back. He said, nope, never got there, but he's back now, and he's going to be a big part of what they do on defense. So this team's better. They will win the division.
Let me follow up with that then, Pete, because you put our power rankings together every single week at CBS Sports. If I just asked you for an AFC pecking order, where does Buffalo fit in?
Well, Kansas City's the champ, and they will stay at the top until somebody beats them, and they're the favorite. They should be. But Buffalo's right there. I think Buffalo, Cincinnati, because they have Joe Burrow back, the Ravens, they'll be in the mix. And I think, you know, the Texans, people throw them in there, but I think we got to slow that down a little bit. I don't see them being in the same class with those teams until they prove to me they can do it again. So I think that's the elite of the AFC. But Buffalo's right there, and they were right there a year ago, and they'll be even better this year.
Ryan, let me ask you a different question then, because there were so many notable departures for Buffalo on both sides of the ball. How did you think they did in the draft to try to amend some of those offseason question marks?
I thought they did a great job, and it starts with Keon Coleman. They drafted one of Pete's favorite players, the second favorite player out of the secondary, Utah, Sione Vaki's in Detroit. But Cole Bishop, the safety, is going to have a chance to play when he's healthy. He wasn't on the field. He was banged up when Pete and I were there last week. But they had holes to fill. They filled those holes, and I think they feel pretty good about it. They still have questions at edge rusher. They weren't able to get any help there. They drafted the linebacker out of Washington, who was also banged up during the training camp process. But again, they're adding depth to key positions, and And to Pete's point, the window hasn't closed. As long as Josh Allen is there, and you could have 21 other tomato cans, they're going to have a chance to win that division. So I think they feel pretty good with where they are and better than where they were at the end of last season.
Yeah, and they added some guys later on the defensive line, Carter, who they really like, a defensive tackle, and Solomon, a pass rusher who can flash, and a guy I really like. But, you mentioned Coleman, and Coleman isn't a burner, and that's something I like receivers that can flat out fly. But in talking to the people around that team, the one thing they all said is he reminds them of Michael Thomas when he was catching all those passes with the New Orleans Saints. And not a burner, but a guy who knows how to get open, a guy who can use his big body, a guy who can get into the middle of the field. So it might take him a little bit of time to get to that point, obviously, but they're excited about him. They're excited about getting Curtis Samuel to the offense as well. So I think they had a good draft, like Ryan said, but more than anything, this is getting bodies back. Von Miller, Matt Milano, Dequan Jones, they have to be healthy, as does every team. But if this team is healthy, they're going to be better on defense than they were a year ago.
Let's end the conversation with the head coach and Sean McDermott. We know the Buffalo Bills have been knocking on the door trying to get to the Super Bowl, gentlemen. Pete, I'll start with you. From your assessment being up there at Bills camp, what's the sense you got from not only what the organization's feeling about Sean McDermott, but you think maybe some of the outside noise when they're talking about him?
It's funny, I asked a bunch of different people in the organization about that. Is there some added pressure on him? Do you feel the pressure inside the building, but also in the city? And the answer was no, which I found a little bit surprising. But again, he's got to get over the hump. He's got to be a guy who can get past Kansas City. He's got to get past the frustration of bad situations and bad coaching decisions like 13 seconds. But I think he's evolved a little bit, and that's one thing you did hear about him is the evolution. Sean McDermott's tightly wound. I mean, let's be real. The players always didn't like him. Some of his old coaches didn't like him at all. But I think he's evolved to the point where his staff now feels comfortable with him. He feels comfortable with the staff. They're a young staff. I mean, Joe Brady's not an old guy. I mean, they're leaning on a young staff, and I think that's a good thing. So, yeah, is there pressure on him to win? If they don't win a playoff game, is he out? I don't necessarily agree with that, but if they don't make the playoffs, I think Sean McDermott could be in trouble.
I don't even know if I'm willing to go that far. And Pete, you talked about the evolution of Sean McDermott, and you and I were talking about that last week at training camp. And that Tyler Dunn article that came out last year that painted Sean McDermott not in the best light, I think that actually, in the long run, did some good for Sean McDermott to take a step back and say, okay, I am tightly wound, as Pete just noted. Maybe I do micromanage certain things that I can let other people be in charge of. Bobby Babbage, the young defensive coordinator, called plays last week in the preseason game. That's a little something in which Sean McDermott gave up some control, and I think he understands more now than he did before how he has to manage this group of men. They're not necessarily young men. These are adults who have families in some cases, so that's different than being a college coach. But I think Pete's overall point is an important one. You have to evolve as a coach, and we're not talking about someone who wins 2 or 3 games every year, Tommy. This guy is always taking this team to the playoffs. They just have to get over the hump, and they haven't done it. I still think if they get to the playoffs and maybe don't win a game, you bring him back because he's done so much good when he's been the coach of the Bills.
Hey, by the way, I'm glad you mentioned Bob Babbage, because Bob Babbage's father's been around the league, was a coach in the league for years. Well, he's a young defensive coordinator. 2 weeks ago in practice, and this story was told to me, one of the defenders made a late hit on a play on Andy Isabella, and it didn't go over too well. And Josh Allen didn't like it and ran over. And Bob Babbage kind of got into it with Josh Allen. He's a fiery dude. And those two kind of, went back and forth at each other. And it's one of those situations where I think Sean McDermott is realizing that maybe he doesn't have to be as involved, and he can trust a guy like Bob Babbage to call those defensive plays. So I think that's a good sign for the Buffalo Bills.
Pete, Ryan, certainly appreciate you guys sharing some observations of Bills training camp as we get ready for an NFL season. Week 1, we're inside a month, and CBS and Paramount Plus will have you covered. Notable Week 1 games include Arizona at Buffalo, Jacksonville at Miami, and Vegas at the Chargers.